Hi everyone, Mark Foley here with Inner Evolution Fitness, doing another Q&A. I'm here with Heather Holmes-Lonergan.
Hi.
She is a certified life coach and has a PhD in developmental psychology. So, Heather, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. It's really good to see you and
Yeah,
talk to you.
for sure.
Haven't seen each other for a few weeks, so yeah, so that's good.
Yeah, good, good. How's everything going with you and your family?
We are good. I feel like we really have kind of the best possible situation. Both my husband and I can work easily from home. Our kids are home.
Fantastic.
Um, they're doing their schoolwork. Everybody's healthy. So, we're just taking it day by day like everybody else, I think.
Yeah,
So,
well, that sounds like the best you can hope for is everyone's healthy right now, right?
yeah, absolutely. That's most important. Yeah.
Very nice, very nice. So, let's get into some of the questions. Like, what are you doing yourself to help deal with this whole pandemic, everything going on with COVID-19 and the shut-in order that the state of Colorado implemented?
Yeah, yeah. So I think that we're doing some of the basic things that a lot of people are doing. Number one, staying home. I think that's really key. We're really limiting our trips. So I made one trip on Monday for groceries and probably won't go again for a couple more days at least. So we're limiting our trips. We're really lucky too. We live in a rural area, so it's pretty easy for us to minimize our contact, but definitely practicing distancing, whenever we are out anywhere. Um, I think the things that we're doing health wise, I'm really making sure that the kids eat well. So we're really watching our diet. We've had a little more sugar. I know a lot of people, there's some stress eating with sugar. We've had that too. But we're trying to minimize that. So we're trying to eat lots of fruits and vegetables, keep our kind of normal healthy diet going. Making sure that everybody's taking their multivitamin and a probiotic and all that, just to keep our immune systems as healthy as possible. And then we're exercising. So you've got your workouts online, which is awesome.
Yep.
So we're still working out. The kids, one of the great things that their teachers are doing is they have to still participate in PE. So they have to go do something, some kind of physical activity and log it.
That's
Um,
awesome.
and sleep is another thing too, just trying to make sure that we're all getting enough sleep.
Yeah,
So
that's pretty important right now, but it's also so easy not to get. I know
yeah.
for myself, like if I'm not going outside regularly and if I'm just playing on social media, that's been affecting my sleep. So yeah.
Ah, yeah, I've noticed that too. Like yesterday, I actually went outside to do my workout because I hadn't been outside all day, and I was like, I was not feeling great because of that. So yeah,
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 quick tip for everyone, like going outside and get the sun helps you sleep later in the
yeah,
day. So
yeah.
that's
Get that vitamin D. Yeah,
yeah.
sure.
What about yourself with in terms of like stress? So a lot of people are
Yeah.
stressing out. Probably everyone in the world has some form of stress with this.
Yes.
What are you doing, or what are you telling like your clients or helping your family with, in terms of dealing with stress?
Yes. I think that's as important as the kind of the things to take care of your physical health is taking care of your mental and your emotional health right now.
Mhm.
A lot of the work that I do is helping people really focus on their mindset and their fear-based thought patterns. Excuse me. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of kind of fear-based thinking right now. What I've really noticed a lot of, we've seen all the reports on the news with um, kind of the panic buying and the hoarding and things like that. And people are like, what's that about? What's going on?
Mhm.
Well, when we're afraid, that activates when there's a threat, or danger, that activates our defense mechanisms. And the primary ones are fight, flight, or freeze.
Okay.
That's what we're seeing, right? Is people are shutting down emotionally. So either they feel, overwhelmed and they're just shutting down and sort of afraid to do anything.
Mhm.
Or they're kind of going into fight mode, where it's sort of like, I'm going to get mine,
Yeah.
because there's this sense of lack, this sense of scarcity. And it's when it's shocking when you go into the store and you see the bare shelves. It's not something any of us in this country have experienced a lot of, certainly individually, but not collectively. We've never been through anything like this.
Yeah.
So I think we're seeing a lot of that fear being acted out. It makes people very reactive. So where I come from and where I'm trying to really coach people and where I coach myself and my family is that it's normal to feel afraid, and we should allow ourselves to feel that, and to say, yeah, this is scary.
Hmm.
And to just allow that in. I see a lot of people trying to push it away or pretend, that they're not afraid.
Hmm.
And I don't think that's really helpful, because then it will, then it'll interrupt your sleep. It will affect you in some other way. It may affect your physical health even.
Like if
So
you're up that fear.
yeah, if you're trying to bottle it up,
Hmm.
and suppress it, it's going to find a way to be expressed, and probably not in a way that's the most healthy. So
Okay.
I think what's more helpful is to acknowledge it and to let yourself sort of just sit with it and say, yes, I feel afraid,
Hmm.
you know, and I've really been encouraging people to stay focused on whatever their spiritual path is. And that may just look like going outside, and being more in touch with nature. It may be meditating, it may be journaling, it may be prayer, whatever it is. I think staying in touch with your internal compass is really important. I'm seeing a lot of people being driven by external circumstances.
Hmm.
So my job is different now. My kid's school looks different now, and I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And yes, that's unsettling. And there's also a lot we can do to still feel in control. But that only happens when we really kind of get still and get centered, and really focus on, kind of our higher consciousness, whatever that looks like for us.
Okay.
So that's one of the things I'm encouraging people to do, is to find that stillness, find that way to center, connect with, again, your higher consciousness, whatever you call that.
Hmm.
I think the second thing that's really important that I mentioned is, briefly, is to control what you can. What do you have control over? So you have control over how much news you watch. I think it's really important to monitor that. I'm sort of letting myself, I kind of scroll the news in the morning
Hmm.
to see, what's changed. Is there anything new that I need to be aware of? And then I might look again like late afternoon or evening. But other than that, I'm trying to stay away from it. And I'm trying to really direct my thoughts, direct my attention to what I can control. So
Sure.
I'm doing work that I can do from home. I'm helping my kids with their schoolwork. I'm, focusing on what I'm going to cook for dinner, honestly, because it's something simple, but it's something I can control, and I can still make that a really good experience for our family. I think focusing on the opportunities that we have,
Okay.
and those opportunities are there even in an experience that feels scary and feels negative. And it is, it's not that there aren't things that aren't scary and aren't negative. Those are truths. But it's also true that, a lot of us are finding ourselves with time that we always say we wish we had. A lot of us say, well, I wish I had time to, whatever.
Right.
For me, that's organizing our family photos that have been sitting in boxes or on the computer, for years. And I've always said, well, when I have time, and suddenly this time has landed in my lap, and I'm like, okay, okay, universe, that's what I'm going to do. So, and I was texting with a friend yesterday. She's learning how to play chess.
Okay.
I've got, friends that are learning new skills. They're learning new hobbies. They're
Okay.
reading more. They're playing games with their kids.
Cool.
So there's still good to be found. And I think it's really important to focus on that.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Okay. Well, all good tips. Like, what about tips that you would give to, say, parents to help their kids with this situation? It seems like going along off what you says, like having them focus on what they can control, have a good like mindset. Like, what are some tips that you think that would help parents out?
Yeah, so this has been a big topic of conversation among me and my friends and in the mom groups that I'm on Facebook, because we're all, all of us have our kids home now.
Yeah.
Our kids are all trying to do school from home. I think that the challenges are different depending on who your kids are, and how they operate. I've seen some parents with kids who suffer from anxiety. Their kids are pretty anxious right now,
Yeah.
because their normal routine has been totally upended.
Sure.
Um, there are other kids who, just the online learning piece. I was saying to some friends on Facebook last night, I said, I think there are some kids that are going to take to this like a duck to water. They're going to love the online learning.
Sure.
They're going to be self-directed. And for two of my kids, that's been the case. Like they've just jumped in and done their assignments, and they want to knock them out so they can have free time, which is fine. That's great. So I think finding the balance between structure and routine versus just trying to be flexible and give your kids some room to feel whatever they're feeling. I think that's really important. For some families, structure and routine is going to keep everybody moving. For
Sure.
other families, they're going to need to be more relaxed. And I think it's just kind of getting in tune with the vibe in your household, the energy in your household, and just trying to adapt to that.
Fantastic.
So like for one of my kids who's older, her schedule doesn't look like my other two. She's kind of figuring that out as she goes. She's starting later, working later at night. We're kind of leaving that up to her. As long as she gets her stuff done, it's okay, because that's what works for her. Some kids are really missing out on the social contact right now, and adults too. Anybody who's more extroverted, this is hard. So what I have noticed is really helpful is one of my kids got on a on a Google Hangout, but either Zoom or Google Hangout, either one. He got on Google Hangout with one of his friends, and it just like what we're doing now, just to see the other person's face, hear the other person's voice. I think that's really helpful. So I think for those kids that need social contact, figuring that out. A lot of teachers are doing Zoom meetings. So like the one my son was on, he was on a Zoom meeting right before we got on our call. He could see the whole class, So I think that's really helpful. I definitely think minimizing the amount of news that you're watching as a parent is going to be really important. And I think bottom line, the thing that I've read that really had an impact on me was that to really think about the fact that your kids are not going to remember the specific events of right now. I mean, they will if it affects them personally, but for those families who stay home, they don't have a close family member who becomes seriously ill from this virus. When they look back on this, they're not going to remember exactly what was going on in the world. What they're going to remember is what was the energy at home? What was the emotional experience at home? Was I scared, or did I feel safe?
Right.
Did it feel like, sort of an extended vacation it's not really a vacation, but did it feel like an extended time off? And oh yeah, we got to try that online learning thing. That was kind of cool. That's the kind of experience that I think a lot of us as parents are hoping to create. So think what you need to do as a parent to manage your energy so that you can show up for your kids in a way that feels calm and reassuring. That said, I think it's also important to talk with your kids if they are afraid, if they are anxious, to, again, just like you would do with yourself, acknowledge that fear and say, yeah, everything's kind of topsy-turvy right now. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. That is really scary. What can you do when you feel scared? Ask kids that question, helping them feel more in control. Like you said, that's going to be really important.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
When you were saying like the kids will remember how like the household energy was and stuff, I have an experience with that.
Oh yeah.
Like I remember Y2K happening and a lot of people kind of freaking out, and not as dramatic or serious as what we have going on now because there was a lot of what ifs. But I remember my dad who worked at DORAD, so he had a little bit.
Oh, he was right in there. Yeah.
Exactly. He was incredibly calm. He was like, we just need to do these things, and if we have that, we're good. And it was very calm. I wasn't scared or anything. So yeah, I definitely remember that. I don't remember much else. So
Yeah, I think one mantra that I keep in mind, it comes from an author. Her name is Glennon Doyle, but she's somebody I really like her writing. And she talked about this in relation to her recovery through AA, from alcoholism.
Mhm.
And she said, you know, the one thing I said to myself was every day was just do the next right thing.
Yeah.
And that's often something I use when I feel anxious, you know, when I read too many news articles, you know, and that fear starts creeping in. That's the thing I repeat. And it sounds like very similar to what your dad said. You
Yeah.
know, let's just do the steps that we can do. What's the next step that we can take? What's the next thing?
Yeah.
And, you know, stay very focused on that. It's very easy to go big picture, you
Mhm.
know, and that can be overwhelming. So I think keeping our focus kind of on, you know, what's the next step that I can take today, right now,
Gotcha.
important.
That does sound very important. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've talked a little bit about it, but what are you doing for people that are getting burnt out from like the media, having their
Yeah.
kids on all the time? Maybe they enjoy more of their me time. They're more introverted and their lack of routine. Like burnout could happen pretty quick. Like
Yeah.
what are some things that you can give people that will help them out with that if they're experiencing it
Yeah.
or before it happens?
Yeah. That's such a great question. I think that, um, I think one thing that helps is kind of taking it one day at a time.
Yeah.
You know, what do I need today to help me deal with this? I think not thinking about the long term as much, especially because we don't know what the long term looks like right now. You know, we're all kind of taking this one week at a time or one deadline at a time.
Mhm.
Um, I think that finding your own space within your home is important. That's one thing we've done here. I'm used to working at home by myself. So having everybody here, you know, we're having to do a little negotiating around schedules and spaces.
Mhm.
I think getting outside, again, you know,
Yeah.
that's really important.
Yeah.
I think exercise is so important. I mean, you can speak to that better than I can, but but yeah, I think exercise, sleep, um, diet, you know, it's the basics, right?
Yeah.
Um, that when we feel burnt out, we've got to go back to the basics and keep our bodies healthy, keep our minds, you know, as healthy as we can.
Mhm.
Blocking out a lot of that media is helpful. But I think it's also really important for us to reach out to other people and to connect.
Sure.
Because I think especially for people, I think the burnout is very closely tied to feeling isolated and feeling alone,
Yeah.
you know, for many of us. And
Yeah.
so I think reaching out, you know, if you need a counselor, I've seen so many counselors and therapists who are offering online services now.
Sure.
Um, you know, I coach over the phone, I coach over FaceTime or Skype or Zoom or whatever. So I think finding people that you can connect with, whether it's a professional or whether it's just staying in touch with friends and family.
Mhm.
I was saying to a client yesterday, you know, we're so used to kind of taking care of ourselves. You know, that's kind of our mantra in this country a lot of the time is you take care of yourself, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps and all of that. But when we're met with this scarcity, um, it's creating, I think, deeper connections among friends and among neighbors and among family. You know, and that's another example of the opportunity. You know, if you go to the store, I was saying this to my client, if you go to the store and you want to bake something and there's no flour on the shelf, you know, what that does is it really, you know, the usual way of doing things,
Mhm.
we're like, oh wait, that path is blocked right now.
Yeah.
What that does is it really can stimulate, again, if we can keep the fear kind of response at bay a little bit, it really activates the creativity, the creative centers of our brain, the problem solving parts of our brain. And
Mhm.
we go, okay, well, I don't have flour, but maybe my neighbor does, you
Okay.
know, and maybe they'll trade. I saw this hilarious Twitter exchange between Chrissy Teigen, John Legend's wife.
Yeah.
She needed some romaine. And so she went on Twitter. She said, I will bake a loaf of banana bread for anybody who's got romaine. She's like, we will do the exchange in a public area, 6 feet apart, no funny business. And sure enough, this random guy said, I got romaine, and he's holding it up. And then and there's a couple more like messages. And then the last photo is them in a parking lot, like 10 feet apart. She's got the romaine, he's got the banana bread, you know, like everybody's happy. It's like, you know, you can't plan for something like that. You know, it's such a great example of how I think that our need for connection carries us through, a lot of these situations. Like, we find ways to connect, we find ways to rely on each other. And I think that's a really big key to burnout. It's self-care, but it's also connection.
Yeah. So what I'm picking up from all this is like creating boundaries for yourself with like media
Mhm.
and going to people like for help or trying to get a connection and use them kind of as a resource if needed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and that may be to even just to share, friends of mine and I have been saying, yeah, this we're scared. We have moments in the day when we are scared.
Uh,
But like for myself, I'm not letting that control my whole day.
right.
And I'm focusing on what positive things can I stay focused on, because that's going to help me be more resilient. It's going to help me stay healthier. So again, it goes back to what can I control, I'm controlling the energy that I sort of allow in, and that's really key.
Gotcha. All right. Well, the next question I have is kind of, it's all very similar.
Hmm.
The people that are actually really terrified about the virus, making the rent and dealing with the uncertainty. So stuff that they normally have complete control over,
Yeah.
they don't as much anymore. There's a lot of what ifs, like with the stimulus package, or for people that are out of work. Like, is it still like focusing on what you can control, or what's your opinion on that?
Well, I mean, again, I'm coming from this position of I'm lucky enough to not be facing that right now. However, it's the fear for those people is something that I feel. I just have tremendous empathy for people who are really scared
Yeah.
for their jobs, for their businesses, for their livelihoods. And it's such a delicate balance between, keeping people home and healthy on the one hand, but if people can't work, they're not going to be able to keep their homes. They're not going to be able to keep their health insurance. They're not going to be able to get care if they need it. And that's not, thankfully, my problem to solve.
Yeah.
But what I can say is that it goes back to actually what I was just talking about a minute ago, with being able to think creatively, being able to solve problems. We can only access that those aspects of our mindset, of our brain,
Mhm.
when we can keep our fear in perspective. So I think it's acknowledging that, yes, this is a real fear for me. I may lose my job. What does that mean? What are the dominoes that are going to fall if that happens?
Yeah.
What can I do right now
Yeah.
to find a workaround? So the things that you're doing, offering workouts from home, you're automatically now reaching a broader audience than you were before, by just interacting with the people who came into the gym in person.
Mhm.
So I think being able to think creatively, to think outside the box, to think about who can I attract to my business, either right now, through like virtual coaching or virtual training. Who can I attract right now, but also who can I attract when things get back to, whatever normal ends up being? Because at some point, businesses will reopen, people will get back to work. And one of the things I said to somebody yesterday is, what position do you want to be in when that happens? So for those of us who can keep our thoughts trained toward what we can control, toward the positive, toward thinking creatively,
Mhm.
we're going to be ready, when things reopen, because we've built that resiliency muscle, in the meantime. Versus, I think if we let our fear and our overwhelm and our anger overtake us, it's going to be much harder to solve those problems. So I think thinking of other ways you could do your job now, um, other opportunities that might be out there that maybe you haven't explored
Mhm.
because you were busy in the job that you had. Start doing your research, start looking, start thinking, who do I know? Who can I connect with?
Yeah.
If I lose my job now, who can I connect with so that I'm ready to go when things reopen? And hopefully I can keep the basics going. I can pay my rent. I can pay my health insurance. I can keep those bills going.
Yeah.
Um, I think another thing that's important right now is to negotiate. If to negotiate with landlords, to try to negotiate with utility companies, whoever it is, to try to see what you can do, to get through this financially. Just what resources can you tap into?
Yeah.
Now that's all, again, that's all kind of problem solving, sort of frontal lobe thinking. And that requires that we're not being reactive. We have to be proactive. So
Yeah.
all the things I talked about earlier, that's going to help. If you can manage your energy, you're going to be able to think in those ways and help solve the problems that you're facing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Something that I'm picking up on, and I heard it from an old coach that I had, that in times of crisis, you need to have like a healthy level of fear so you can tap into that creativity. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I think I think for me, it again goes back to acknowledging the fear,
Yeah.
and saying, yes, I'm afraid. And what action can I take?
Mhm.
So if we just dwell in I'm afraid and there's nothing I can do, that's when it can sort of overtake us. But if we kind of, I think fear is a teacher. Fear is a guide, right? So when we feel fear, if we can use that as a guidepost, to sort of almost light the way, and to say, okay, I'm afraid. What am I most afraid of? Am I most afraid of getting sick? I had another friend that went through that last week where she was having some asthma symptoms and she got very scared.
Yeah.
What if I'm sick? What happens to my kids? What happens to my husband? And she worked her way through that. But, for her, that's her fear. For other people, it might be losing their job. For someone else, it might be a family member that they're really afraid for. So it's like, what am I most afraid of? What can I do about it? What action can I take? And when we shift into action, that's where I think it becomes more kind of the healthy level of fear that you're talking about. But I think it is important to use it as a sign of, okay, there is something to be afraid of.
Hmm.
And, when we panic, we can't think. So I think it's really keeping that fear in that place of, what is it trying to show me? What is it trying to teach me? How do I need to change my behavior right now
Yeah.
to manage it? You know,
Yeah. That
so
makes
does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, so sometimes in situations like this, when I should be fearful, I'm sometimes superly optimistic.
Hmm.
I don't feel that fear, so I don't become creative. I just like
Yeah.
everything's gonna work out. But that's something that I've been working with, and yeah, I need to have a little bit of fear. Like, need to be a little bit more realistic, because
Yeah.
if I'm interpreting this right, like if you're super optimistic, then you're not gonna take proactive steps.
Yeah, I do think there is a balance there. I definitely have seen people, I mean, we've all seen people in the news that have been way too cavalier,
Yeah.
about this, and really minimizing the seriousness of it.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to consider, sort of, who are you getting your information from? And to really listen to what the health experts are saying, the people who have experience dealing with this. What advice are they giving?
Yeah.
And I think take that seriously. At the same time, I would say optimism is a really great quality to hold on to at this time, because we know the effects of chronic stress, and chronic pessimism
Mhm.
on the body. Psychology research tells us that those effects are damaging to the body, to our physical health. So I think being optimistic is a great trait to have. It's just tempering that. It's just like we would temper our fear with action, temper our optimism again with action. What are the realistic steps that I should be taking to keep myself safe?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, that's great. Um, so like, what are some of the resources that you're going to for like the experts on like COVID-19? Like myself,
Yeah.
personally, I'm just going to the CDC,
Yeah.
and that's pretty much all I'm getting my information from, just the
Yeah.
stats, the best actionable tips you should be taking right now. Is there any
Yeah.
other sources that you would recommend, or is that a good one?
The CDC is the main one for me too. I'm also looking at the World Health Organization, WHO,
Mhm.
because I think that gives us, I think it's important to look at this from a global perspective, not just what's happening in our country or in your state,
Sure.
but look at the patterns. I'm a researcher by training. So I'm going to look at the research. I'm looking at the patterns.
Yeah.
What's the pattern been in Italy? What's the pattern in
Right.
New York now?
Yeah.
and just expecting, I don't expect it to be different,
Mhm.
where we live in Colorado. Um, I mean, I'm hoping that it will be different. I'm hoping that a lot of the measures that we've taken
Yeah.
will slow it down,
Yeah.
where we are, because we are watching this guidance. But yeah, I think looking at, watching what the doctors say, paying attention to what the doctors say, and especially the doctors who have experience with pandemics.
Yeah.
Um, they know what they're dealing with. And so whatever they say, I'm, okay.
Yeah, they are the experts. They're just not
Yeah,
like well wishing and stuff like that. Yeah,
right.
I'm
Yeah.
right with you. And I definitely hope Colorado's different. It seems like we took some earlier action than other states. Obviously, there could be things that we could do more of, but we're only in
Yeah.
control of ourselves, right?
Yeah. Well, and I said this to someone yesterday too. I said, we're not going to be perfect, right? Like we're each not going to make perfect choices individually. And as a state or as a country, we're not going to make perfect choices. But I do think that we can make good use of the best guidance, the best information that's out there.
Yeah,
And if we follow that, then, I feel like we're doing what we can.
that's great. That's great. All
So,
right.
yeah.
Well, I think that's all my questions. So, where can people like reach you if they want to find some professional help from you, or is there other resources to find good professional like counselors to help them through this time of need?
Yeah. I can. Well, to find me, you can find me on Facebook at Conscious Connections Coach.
Okay.
Uh, and that's my Facebook page. That's where I'm in the most contact with people. So I'm posting videos. I'll share this video there, posting just sort of tips and insights, as often as possible there. Um, as far as finding, I can find some links for counselors and therapists that work online, and we can share those too.
Yeah, and I'll
Yeah.
put them in
Okay.
the notes for sure. Okay,
Yeah.
fantastic. Was there anything else that you'd like to end with there, Heather?
I think one thing that popped in my head was I think what feels scary to all of us right now is that, it feels like we don't know what the quote unquote new normal is going to be.
Sure.
Um, and we tend to go to a place in our minds that we think it's going to be worse, And I think to not be too attached to that idea is important, that we don't know what the outcome of all this will be, and we can't control that outcome.
Yeah.
So I think continuing to look for the good in each day and continuing to find that optimism, to find the positive, in the connections that you have, I think that's one thing we can count on right now. And I feel like that's a really important message that I want people to get. So, yeah,
That's a great message.
thank you.
Alrighty, well, I think that will wrap it up with everything. So, thank you again,
Thank
Heather.
you.
Yeah,
Thank
this
you so
was
much.
good
This was great.
information. And again, I will put all the links with this video if you want to contact Heather or find some counselors and just good resources. And with that, I will sign off. And I'm Mark Foley with Inner Evolution. Thanks for watching.